So was it really a dream of yours to work in the automotive industry? Was it a goal?
Actually, during school, I was keen to become an archaeologist. So I wanted to unearth secrets. But when I came across my first computer in school, so this changed overnight from one day to the other. I wanted to study computer science and work as programmer.
This is fascinating because, honestly speaking, I think you're the first one I'm talking to in the context of SDV to put the customer experience so much at the center of it.
What we actually need is a user-defined vehicle, giving the users flexibility and choice to customize and adapt the vehicles defined by software according to them.
From a cultural perspective, when you're comparing Japan to Korea, to China, to Europe, to US, do you think that SDV is a global thing, or do you think that some regions might approach it in a different way?
If you talk to US companies, they usually look at what's happening at the US West Coast. And if you talk to European companies, especially the Germans, they look to China. Chinese are very smart. They are very pragmatic, no frills, just do it, which gives them speed.
Behind every dashboard, every ADAS feature, every HMI, every line of code lies a human story. I'm Stéphane Lacrelle, and this is Under the Hood, Automotive Storytelling, a podcast where we uncover the narratives that drive innovation. As I like to say, it's about the little stories that create the grand story of automotive. And so today, I'm extremely proud, really, to invite and welcome in this podcast, Martin Schleicher. Martin, welcome.
Hi, Stefan. Hi, everybody. Really pleased to join your podcast. So happy to talk to you about the covered secrets of our software in the automotive industry.
Wonderful. All right. So if anybody doesn't know Martin, I'm going to start by a little introduction so that we know you a little bit better. Okay, so Martin, you're a seasoned professional with more than 25 years of experience in the automotive software business.
Right.
You joined Continental in January 2021, bringing with you a wealth of knowledge gained over almost 3 decades at Electrobit, where you held various management and executive roles, including focusing on company strategy, product and portfolio management, and partnerships. Throughout your distinguished career, Martin, you have been deeply focused on making the software-defined vehicle happen, and we will talk a lot about SDV today. You've been instrumental in driving the transition to a software-defined mindset in automotive, seeing it as a paradigm shift in how vehicles and their software are developed. You believe that the value in the future vehicle lies increasingly in the software, challenging the traditional view of software as merely a cost factor or an add-on to the hardware. And we will talk a lot about the evolution of the industry in that sense. Martin, your influence extends far beyond the walls of Continental or Electrobit. You are playing actually a pivotal role in shaping industry standards and fostering collaboration, notably serving as the chairman of the NDS Association, the Navigation Data Standard, which is a globally recognized standard for automotive map data. You are actively involved in key initiatives that are defining the future of automotive software, like the Eclipse SDV Working Group and the SOEFI, I don't know exactly how we pronounce, but we'll talk about this organization in a minute, governing board. You are a strong advocate for industry-wide cooperation and leveraging models like open source to drive innovation forward faster. Your perspective is uniquely valuable to our audience of automotive professional, tech enthusiasts, and strategic communicators because you bridge the gap between the technical vision and the practical reality of this massive industry transformation. You understand the challenges of organizational change, the necessity of accelerating development cycles, and the power of data-driven development. You embody the strategic thinking needed to connect engineering excellence with market relevance in this rapidly evolving landscape. Martin, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you today to share your personal journey, your insights into translating complex technology shift and your vision for the future of automotive software. Bienvenue, Martin, bienvenue.
Yeah, Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. Really impressed. I wasn't actually aware of all these things that I've been doing so far.
Excellent. Hey, Martin, to warm up a little bit, I worked for Harman for 12 years, and my office was in Germany. And this is where, although obviously Germany is very close to France, this is I work in today, I would say on a day-to-day basis with Germans, that I started to understand the love of Germans for cars. And there are so many anecdotes that I could tell about, and so many stories I could say about how the Germans treat cars differently than anybody else in the world, really. So I wanted to know, are you a car freak? Yeah. Are you in love with cars? Have you been always in love with cars?
Yeah, actually, yes. So according to my mother, my first word was car, not mama or daddy. Not sure if it's true. Can't remember. Yeah, anyway, I like cars, especially sports cars with sufficient performance. And actually also my wife, my daughter, and my mother-in-law, they're also petrol heads. So it's
Okay.
a nice family, so we can really have fun with great cars.
Excellent. So was it really a dream of yours to work in the automotive industry? Was it a goal?
Actually, during school, I was keen to become an archaeologist, not technology. I did see my career. So I wanted to unearth the secrets. But when I came across my first computer in school, so this changed overnight. And from one day to the other, I wanted to study computer science and work as programmer, which I did then actually. And after graduating from university, I started at a small company. Nowadays, I would say a startup, but actually not in automotive. I'm living in Erlangen. If you know the region, this is where Siemens is very strong. The company I worked for had a lot of projects with Siemens Medical. This is where I actually started. It took some years when we came across automotive, because in the 90s, the automotive industry started this huge activities and innovations around electronics in cars. And actually, if you look at these large medical devices like X-rays, computer tomographs, etc., already at that time, they had very similar architecture, distributed systems, communicating over the CAN bus, but also safety aspects. You don't want to endanger patients with too much X-ray doses, or if they be pushed by some moving parts of a big medical device. So it was fairly easy at that time. The company was called Stresoft. It's actually the predecessor of Electrovit. To start the inroads into the automotive, especially with the Southern Europe.
It's fair to say that, and I'm afraid this is the case for both of us, but we live in the world before internet, before the mobile phones, before the generative AI. How has all those technologies breakthroughs, how has this impacted your career and the way and the kind of roles you wanted to have?
I came across internet relatively early. So in those times, we actually started using embedded technology coming from Microsoft or Java outside the automotive industry and transferred into automotive. And I was always fascinated by the huge advancements coming from the software, from the IT side, the US West Coast, both from a technology point of view. A lot of innovation was happening there, but for me, it was really mind-opening starting to work with companies like Microsoft, the way how they organize and run those companies, trying to learn from their successes and also their failures, and actually and apply to automotive.
Okay, so now if we move on to, I would say, the importance of software that software had in your career and everything you have been doing. We know that the automotive industry has been a hardware-led industry for pretty much 100 years, and now we see the move towards software. But you have been probably amongst the first to have seen this and anticipate this move, started to see the power of software in automotive.
On the one hand, things like when Microsoft started, I don't know who still remembers the idea of the Auto PC, bringing in advanced software environments for embedded systems into the automotive market. Also Java technology being introduced in infotainment system by some OEMs at that time, and seeing all those new opportunities, what you could do with displays and nice graphics there. So that was definitely one thing, and it became clear pretty soon that, okay, software development, HMI development, that's something that goes different than classical ECU software development if you do a control loop or something like that. Also seeing that some functions can be done in software, like navigation. So we did navigation software very early. We saw that operating systems like autos are being needed, and there could be a software product business built around that, looking into the complexity of the software and then trying to find the parts, the building blocks, which you can develop and market as a standalone software product. This was the starting point.
Okay. So you do have a, if I may say it this way, you do have a passion for standards in open source, right? So there are a few examples to have named in the introduction, like the NVS or Eclipse or the scalable open architecture for embedded edge. If we look at the automotive industry, it's an industry where most of the companies, they want to have their own version to have very differentiated, I would say, solutions toward the competition. And on your side, you are very much active into promoting standards across the industry. So how do you see this working together? This willingness on one side to have very differentiated offers in the standards?
Yeah, that's one of the key challenges, actually, and that also goes through my career. On the one hand, the cars, especially the low-end cars, they need to be affordable. So systems need to be designed according to costs. If you want to have economies of scale in software, need to have a large volume. So trying to have the same software being used in as many devices as possible. And that equation doesn't always go well. Finding the right mix between reuse standards on the one side, but also dedicated and optimized solutions on the other side. That's not easy, and that's what we always try to find out. Open source is actually one way to tackle that. By having standards that provide flexibility to adaptation or to modify, to build something on top. So that's clearly one way that the industry could achieve both, especially the automotive industry.
Do you see the industry accepting the idea of open source and standards like this, or do you see this as a continuous battle?
And in some areas like infotainment, open source is actually there since 10, 15 years. Certain software components you just take from open source and integrate in your system. It doesn't make any sense. I don't think that anybody would redevelop something that's existing out there. And I think you can see that. Just go into the copyright notice screen of your infotainment or your vehicle manual, and there will be long lists of open source software. So here it's quite common. In other parts of the vehicle, like ADAS systems, the open source policy a couple of years back in most companies was like, open source is forbidden. And this is now changing, that companies see the value and the contribution using open source on the one hand, but also collaborating and jointly developing and contributing to open source. The honest challenge here, actually, from my point of view, is that there's still a lot of myths, lack of knowledge, etc., about how open source works, how the collaboration models work, how the business models work. So if you talk to executives from our industry, sometimes you get the feeling that they say, oh, let's do open source. And then the unspoken part of the sentence is, because there are hundreds of volunteers outside who are just waiting to work on our stuff. Actually, I'm not so sure that this is going to work out.
So if I hear correctly, this is a communication challenge, right? How do we messaging correctly what open source is actually about? And it's one challenge, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And how do you tackle this challenge then?
Yeah, I tackle it and say, okay, if we are looking for software in automotive, it needs to meet certain criteria, safety, quality, and other standards. To achieve that, you need well-trained, well-managed software engineers. And these guys are expecting a decent salary for the performance. If not, they're going into different areas and different markets. And we have plenty of options for software engineers today out in the market. So if you want to attract software engineers, you need to pay them decently, give them attractive jobs and ways where they can grow. So let's not just see open source as a way to reduce costs. You will have cost savings at the end on the long run, but not initially.
If I look at the different attempts that some manufacturers have made in terms of app stores or developing apps for their own systems, many of them have been having a lot of difficulties. Some of them even been failing, because I guess that one of the challenge was actually to attract developers to develop automotive specific apps for the automotive industry. Do you see on one end open source and on the other side SDV? Do you see both as opportunities to actually improve the situation?
Yeah, yes. SDV is about providing and delivering, enhancing customer experience over the vehicle lifetime. And so SDV is a means to an end. It's not an end by itself to provide great customer experience, especially in a competitive market. And that's the key learning from the smartphone or the PC market. The companies who better understand what the customers actually want and can continuously provide through software great customer experience are the ones who prevail. Translating this into automotive means first you need to see how you learn what your customers really and how you can deliver according to that. This is not so much the way how the automotive industry is actually working in the past. Especially if you look at my colleagues from Germany, German engineering has been proud of for, 100 years of being able to specify and define the perfect product up front. So this change in mindset, say, okay, I will have, of course, a decent and a good usable product initially, but I need to think about how continuously learn what the customers like and dislike, what market trends are, and how I can incorporate it and enhance my product offering is essential. So open source, software marketplaces, or being able to provide new functionality over the vehicle lifetime, I think is key, is essential to sustain in the global competitive market.
But this is fascinating because honestly speaking, I think you're the first one I'm talking to in the context of SDV to put the customer experience so much at the center of it. Because very often when I talk to people about SDV, it's more kind of a B2B/engineering conversation. The consumer is more very much down the line. But what you're saying is that SDV is actually the consumer experience enabler. Is that a good way to put it?
Yes. What I learned, and actually also worked with those US companies a lot about, think about it from the customer perspective, work backwards. Yeah, Amazon, they have this great strategy working backwards, try to define a scenario, describe the scenario as good as possible, what the end product and the customers really like, and then work it backwards. So we did this exercise once after having our first activities in Conti around SDV, and we came up with what we actually need is a user-defined vehicle, giving the users flexibility and choice to customize and adapt the vehicles, which is largely defined by software anyhow, according to their needs.
A user-defined vehicle. That's fascinating. I really love that. And it's funny because I had this conversation in another episode of this podcast, and one of my guests was saying, if I ask to 10 people the definition of SDV, I'm going to have 10 different answers. And so I don't know if you would agree to that. And eventually, what would be your definition of SDV?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I sometimes am a little bit scratching my head because I've been using and pushing the term SDV also for the last maybe 4 years. And we actually fail to really have established common principles or definitions across the industry. And that's not ideal because there's so many different opinions. I think it makes it more difficult to explain it to end customers as well as in our own organization, what it's really about and how the end customers as well as then the companies, the the OEMs and the suppliers benefit from it. And I mean, SDV is about being able to provide customer experience, new features, software updates, but also bug fixes over the vehicle lifetime, and in a swift and continuous way. Being fast, being nimble, being able to adjust to the customer needs. For me, that's the essence of SDV.
What I've read multiple times and also heard multiple times is the conflict between the lead times in the automotive industry versus the software lead times. We expect software in our PCs, in our tablets, in our phones to be updated on a regular basis and faster, actually, whereas a car needs to live for 15 years. Do you see really a way to reconcile those two kind of lead times?
Yeah, it's a very good thing. And I think the continuous updates on your smartphones and then your PC have laid the ground for that, so the end customers appreciate it. However, I still see two types of customers. Just looking at my own family, there's the ones like my daughter who wants every latest and greatest update immediately, while others are puzzled if the HMI looks a bit different the next day. Yeah, like my father-in-law. Yeah. And that's a challenge, and it probably will be a challenge going forward. Yeah, maybe two examples out of my career. So when we started, I think it was nearly 20 years ago in Electrobit at that time, looking into navigation software as a software product, standalone. Yeah, that at that time this was a feature that was delivered by the tier one suppliers as part of the infotainment box. We started in the P&D market. I think nobody remembers that.
I do. I was working at TomTom.
Okay, yeah, good. So you're in. And then you know that we have been releasing major versions every 6 months, yeah, of those things. We had the development times, and then first automotive project at that time, we thought about, what, 2.5 years? This is more than enough. However, the OEMs kept us busy to make sure that their product quality was really a maximum level. And then we at Electrobit, we had a project with Tesla, actually provided the first version of their China navigation. And they came back, okay, we want to launch it in 9 months. And then we really had to scratch our heads about what were those processes we actually had in place a couple of years back that were enabling us to deliver a major software version within 6 months and then provide updates according to it. So other markets are quite used to it, and even delivering great product quality software. Yeah. It's not like that your devices are crashing every other minute. So we can learn a lot from the advancements that happened over the last 20 years in the IT industry and apply it to the automotive market.
So to come back to my question on the lifetime of a vehicle versus the regular updates of software, do you see central computing as a way to address this?
Yeah, definitely. In the past, the principle was you have a new function, there was an ECU, the software was integrated, and everything was optimized and dedicated. Central compute essentially means that also the central computers are not tied to a specific function anymore, so you can add new functions, you can deploy functions for different devices. Yeah, you can think about combining ECUs in a bigger device. So by definition, you have an architecture that provides the flexibility to integrate or deliver or come up with new functions.
But still, we see in the industry today that central computing is not easy to, and therefore there is a lot of conversation between zonal architecture and central. So do you see SDV being able to be applied regardless of the architecture, or do you think that there is only one architecture that will really enable SDV?
There will be various architectures, and the goal of the central compute was also to reduce hardware costs. And some of the car manufacturers and suppliers are currently struggling bringing down the costs, but by still having enough headroom and also flexibility. SDV is also a means to look at how can we shorten development times, how can we reduce time to market, and how can we continuously provide updates. And again, there's a lot of innovation has happened. Actually, there's also something that is coming a lot out of the open source software development area. Just think about what is the second most important invention or product that Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, made. It's Git. And all the modern software development that has been introduced around Git provide a lot of productivity gains for software development. It's something that we could benefit a lot in automotive. So looking into ways how to develop software faster in shorter time cycles, but not compromising quality or safety and security. This is the other aspect of SDV. Because if we can't develop software fast, then yeah, how can we provide continuous updates to the end customer?
From a cultural perspective, meaning the comparing Japan to Korea, to China, to Europe, to the US, do you think that SDV is a global thing, or do you think that some regions might approach it in a different way?
Oh, it's an interesting discussion. I think it's clearly some difference. First observation I have is if you talk to US companies, car manufacturers and suppliers, they usually look at what's happening at the US West Coast. Yeah, what are the companies doing there and try to apply their principles. If you talk to European companies, especially the Germans, they look to China. What's happening in China more, actually.
And what does do then?
Yeah, let me start first with China. Chinese are very smart in actually also looking to the US West Coast and just applying the concepts that are successful there and transfer it to automotive. They are not afraid, but they are very pragmatic, no frills, just do it. Yeah. And then think how to solve the problems along the way and not upfront, which gives them speed. Yeah. This is one of the secrets. I don't see that much secrets actually of this famous China speed. Speed is just their pragmatic, simple solutions and just reuse what's there. Japan, I think, to come to that, finds very interesting. So if you look into modern software development, that's usually agile or lean methods. A lot of these principles come from the Toyota's lean production system, applied to software. However, agile software development is not so popular in Japan. And I talked to many Japanese people, and I still have not fully understood why they were so successful in applying a lean production system. Yeah, avoiding waste. Yeah, is one of those principles. Or go Gemba. Yeah, go there, see where the problems are, but not being able to apply it into software development. Maybe somebody in the audience has some good ideas how this is coming.
Yeah, okay. I will definitely ask the question to the audience to send us an email, and we'll make sure to look at this. Looking a little bit towards the future now, obviously everybody talks about AI and generative AI, machine learning and stuff. And interestingly, the automotive industry, when I look at my LinkedIn feed, I see the automotive industry talking a lot about SDV, but not so much about AI, interestingly. So do you think that it's just because they are still looking at it, or do you think that for them it's just another tool? How do you see AI in the world of SDV?
Actually, my prediction is that I thought this is already going to happen this year, that we are talking about the AI-defined vehicle instead of the software-defined vehicle by now. I think we'll see a big influence of AI to SDV. And here I see mainly two areas. Of course, when talking about AI, we're talking a lot about functions in the vehicle leveraging AI. And we will see that not only in, let's say, conversational AI assistants in the infotainment system, but also in other areas. Yeah? There's clearly many areas where we'll see AI. Software-defined vehicle, I see a huge potential in using AI for the development of the systems. Yeah? So think about typical automotive development according to the V model, ASPICE, functional safety. Most of the development effort is not about writing code. Yeah, just review things, document, test things, make sure everything is consistent, making sure you execute the process step in the right order, document and properly, and so on. Or just have sufficient test cases to cover your source code or to cover all your requirements. And that's an area where I can definitely help, just as a tool for productivity tool for a software developer or for any kind of engineer, taking actually boring work, who wants to write test cases, if you can rather write a cool piece of software, yeah, to take some workload off them. How much that can be, let's see, but here I clearly see the benefit of AI.
So would you say then to continue on this thought that AI can potentially lower the barrier of entry for developers into the automotive ecosystem?
Yeah, especially if you're junior engineers, I think they can learn, yeah, from AI is trained according, and in this case, according to what other developers have written before. So just helping them to speed up. Personally, I think it is always good to have to just not use it without reviewing or understanding or analyzing the work that has been created by AI. You always need to review and take a look at it and see why has it done it like this. Yeah? Because, of course, there are also mistakes in the stuff that AI is creating. Yeah, hallucination, or sometimes it just won't do what you want it to do.
But so one part is on the development side, and the other part would be on the user experience side, on the personalization side. You see a potential in having AI to understand better how the user is driving and maybe having different behavior depending on who's in the car, right?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's also transparency is needed for the user to understand why AI comes up with certain recommendations. Otherwise, I'm afraid that end customers will not necessarily trust AI if they cannot understand a certain behavior coming from an AI.
So if I sum up a little bit the conversation we have been talking about open source, we have been talking about standards, SDV, and the cultural differences. And every time, and I know that you know that I'm passionate about storytelling, but I heard a lot about how to communicate this, how to message this, how to convince either customers or internal stakeholders, and so on. From a general standpoint, how do you approach storytelling or creating narratives?
It's a very relevant question because software is intangible, so you don't see anything. And also, even the process of creating software, you don't see much, just engineers typing at a screen. So it was always a challenge getting the message across. Getting message across to managers. Not all the managers are software experts, and then even to non-software experts, helping them to understand. I think that this is a theme that was consistent throughout my career, being able. First thing I might also maybe as takeaway is from a customer perspective, customers want to understand, want to influence, want to control it. Yeah. So showing them the levers, the areas where they can influence, where they can control, show this in a transparent way is a best practice that always has paid off. Yeah. So nobody wants to be surprised with a bill. And in my teams, I always explained it to the team colleagues. Say, okay, if you order somebody to do your garden, for example, you don't want to have a surprise and say, "Oh, I just did this thing extra and it costs you 100 extra hours or whatever." Yeah. Try to get into the other's shoes, even if they are not an expert. Give them the levers and the means how they can influence and impact their work, so they can get the most value out of that. Another thing where software is different, the effort and the value from a customer point of view, the effort you have to put in and the value from customer point of view are not linear. So there can be simple changes that have a lot of simple parts of a software that have a huge value for customers, while other areas where you put a lot of effort in have little value for the customer. Yeah, this is different in intangible projects. Yeah, coming back to the first question is how to provide transparency and also ways to influence for the customers. For me, it usually helps we talk about an order of magnitude, yeah, of a project. Do you think this is a work for 10 engineers or 100 or thousands? Yeah, and this gives the customer an unbiased way to think about their point of view, and then gives you a clue where to start a discussion about, have you considered this? That is part of the work. Have you considered that? Yeah. So these are the things that I usually do, talking to customers about value of software.
And so to end this conversation, what do you have an advice to give to our audience about storytelling or giving a message to across?
Yeah, maybe one example of a storytelling that actually didn't work. So as mentioned, I did computer science, and there is a mathematical proof that software has errors. Yeah, you can have a statistical proof. Yeah, there's a certain ratio of errors in the source code, but there's also mathematical proof. Yeah. This didn't happen in any customer discussion to say I can prove that there's some errors in the software.
Excellent.
So
anything
as
you
a
would like to add?
Yeah, positive advice is doing these analogies. Yeah, that usually helped me. And what I did is not trying to come up with one simple story to tell, but rather test it and float it around with colleagues and others. So what do you think about? Yeah. So let's say somebody wants to sell software. One analogy I use is, so if you're a great software developer, it doesn't mean that somebody wants to pay money for the software. So if you're a good chef, can you run a restaurant? Yeah, it's not the same. Yeah, you need to understand all the business and economic side point of view and not just make great recipes. And same for software. So looking into those analogies that people can resonate with and try them and see how well it works with your specific case upfront before you go out to an important customer or executive workshop.
Yeah, analogy is a very powerful tool for any storyteller. That's clear. Thank you so much for this. And we are coming to an end. I would like to thank you so much, Martin, to having spent this time with us. Really, thank you so much for everything you have been sharing with our audience. This is great. For anyone who is listening to this, I would very strongly encourage you to follow Martin on LinkedIn. He always shares extremely interesting stories, actually, and insights, and don't hesitate to follow Martin and even to get in touch with him, especially if you are interested in anything that relates to SDV. I really love your tagline on LinkedIn, you make SDV happen, and I think that you have been really proving today everything you know about this topic. All right, so if you have enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe wherever you get your podcast from and share with your friends and colleagues who are passionate about the future of automotive technology. Remember that behind every dashboard and every features and every line of code lies a human story. And those are the stories that we are committed to uncovering here on Under the Hood. Until next time, I'm Stéphane Lagrelle. Thanks for listening.